welcome. Come on in. The water is fine. Happy snow day. Yeah, how's the snow day been going? You guys been enjoying it? Silence? Are we not feeling very talkative? Um, um, so yes. Sorry, I had a private chat message that I was responding to. So yeah, any snow day stories? You guys do anything interesting?
I just been doing schoolwork all day.
Schoolwork all day?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good day for schoolwork. You've been able to concentrate and get it done?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one upside. Actually, all the snow is sort of perfect for staying inside, isn't it? Right? Like even if you wanted to go outside, there would be nowhere to
Yeah.
go.
hmm
Yeah. Did anybody take a nice walk and listen to a podcast while they were walking? Jen fell. Are you serious?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, maybe that was a private message. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. But so Drissa, you went for a walk?
Yeah.
How did it
My
go?
friend came to my place. We did some homework stuff together. So I was going to accompany him, and on my way back, I listened to it.
Wonderful. What did you think?
Yeah, it was great.
It was great. Well,
Yeah,
I can't ask for a higher review. Maybe you could tell it was made by the University of Virginia,
yeah,
and that's where I went to school. So that's one reason I assigned it, is because I know the people who made it. I was in the religious studies department when I was there. I didn't actually make it myself, but it's very knowledgeable people talking about these issues, and it really takes place in Charlottesville, Virginia. Have you guys ever heard of Charlottesville before? No? Well, I'm going to remind you of one reason maybe you have heard of it other than the University of Virginia. So, all right, so you've got, sounds historic to history. Yes, it might be historic to history. Um, you guys got an assignment tonight, don't you? What's this assignment all about? We got a forum post. What's the role of religion in the creation of caste? There are kind of two parts to that, right? You got to think about what is caste, then you got to think about role of religion. So it might sound kind of straightforward, but there's some things you're going to need to think about. Just like Driss and I were discussing, this podcast is part of the assignment, so hopefully you'll get a chance to listen to that. Hopefully you already have, because that will help you discuss things today. And if you haven't yet, be sure to listen to it. And then, of course, Wilkerson, which we've been talking about all week. So it's kind of the two pieces will come together, right? So Wilkerson, she does more on caste. The podcast does more on religion, right? And so then your job is to put them together. So any questions off the bat? Are you guys clear on what I'm asking you to do for this assignment? We've already done it once, so there's nothing new. Obviously, I guess the topic is new, but the formatting is the same. So anyways, if you have any questions for me, feel free to send me a message and I would be happy to help. Otherwise, we can keep going. Any questions before we go? All clear? Feeling good, feeling great? All right, so why don't we keep going? Okay, so one question maybe we can start off with, this is a bit of a weird question, and a lot of what we will discuss today and what we discussed last time is why caste is a problem, and it is a problem, but I think an interesting place to start is kind of from the inside, right? We talked about insider versus outsider perspectives. Oh, we got a new person joining us. And so from the inside of caste, let's say you wanted to defend caste or say why caste is somehow useful, what would you say? Why do people have a caste in society? What does it do for society in terms of, like, let's say, contributions or positive, theoretically positive things? They don't have to be completely positive, but theoretically positive things. What does caste do for a society? And as you can see on the slide, I have some thoughts, but I'd like to hear your thoughts too. What do you guys think?
I think it creates a communitarism.
Mm-hmm.
So
create,
like it make people come together and do stuff together.
mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, if you think about if there were no hierarchy, right? If there's no caste system, everybody would be the same. We'd all have the same education. We'd have all the same skills. Nobody would be a specialist in any particular role, right? And so, like Drissa is saying, this helps us specialize, and then we can kind of work together, right? It gives you a very clear sense of what you're supposed to do with your life. And in fact, if we look at our society, that's not always clear, right? A lot of people are wondering, what is my purpose? What am I doing here, right? And that's a fair question. What are we supposed to do here? Kristen says it creates unity. Kevin says separated minority status. So there's unity and separation. Actually, if we put these comments together, I think we get a pretty good vision of what's going on here, right? There is a separation where, for example, the Brahmin in a Hindu caste system, they are separate from all the other people. As a result, there's a sense that they're somehow special. They can communicate with the gods. Remember, we saw it in that video clip, right? The king goes up to the Brahmin, he touches his foot, and he says, hey, can you talk to the gods for me? And he talks to the gods, and the gods come and they help the king out. Remember that? And so, yeah, it separates certain groups from each other, but it also gives a sense of unity across these different groups, right? And it gives you a sense of how these groups should fit together. And when we think about America, this is another problem for us, right? We are very separated. I think, you know, recent political events highlight this more than, you know, maybe more than ever. We have very different worlds that all exist together in America, and we don't have a good sense of how they can all work together, right? We don't have a good sense of how they might unify and unite and cooperate, you know, just to combine all the things that you guys were talking about. And so you might argue we need more of a caste system, or at least a more clear system in America, because what we have now is so unclear. It's a little hard to know what to do, right? Good. What about duty? So this is something you've all been kind of talking about. This is something we'll talk about more actually as we read the Ramayana in the coming weeks. Even I think the very first reading of next week, duty will be a big part of it, but we can start thinking about it now. What is a duty, and how does that feature into a caste system? What is a duty? Don't be shy. Role you are assigned and must carry out. Good. Yeah, and if we think about who is assigning us these roles, it's society, right? We come together as a society and we say men are supposed to do this and women are supposed to do that. And of course, now in modern society, people tend to challenge those roles and say, hey, you know, I'm a man and I want to take care of some kids, damn it, right? And we can try to find gender equality through this process, through this conversation. But, you know, in the old days, let's say, you had your social role and you were expected to fill your role, right? And you need to carry out your social duty. Exactly. So I think this should be pretty clear by now, but there's a sense that a caste system is made, right? It's made by people. It's made by a society. It's a social construct. It's sort of a fancy way of saying that. It's a social construct. It's something society makes, and it makes it in order to organize society, right? To make society work better, to make theoretically better, and to make people cooperate with each other. What about this idea of compassion and care. What is the role of compassion and care? Can that be a part of a caste system? Again, in an ideal situation, can you imagine compassion or care fitting into a caste system? Hello? As you're thinking about it, I would argue that a lot of the crises we've seen in America in the last year really come down to a lack of care, in sort of many senses of the word. But for example, look at Texas right now. Are you guys aware of what's happening in Texas right now? What's happening in Texas right now? Snowstorm? Yeah, but we have a snowstorm here, right? And we're not like making big news. Frozen windmills. Yeah, and I don't even claim to be an expert in what's happening in Texas because obviously I'm not there. But yeah, power outages, infrastructure is getting destroyed, right? Yeah, exactly. It's a major mess. They didn't know how to handle it because they aren't used to that. Yeah, yeah. I don't pretend to know really why things are going so crazy right now, but they are going crazy right now. And so we can sort of point fingers at whoever we think is in charge or whatever. But yeah, some facts are it's usually not that cold. It's usually a lot warmer in the wintertime. So for whatever reason, they were unprepared. Some people are saying they should have been prepared and they should have known. And other people are saying, no, it's not, no one could have predicted this. I don't have a dog in that fight. But regardless, there is a lack of care happening, right? People need help. People need some care. They need some power. I've seen houses, the house getting flooded, barn their house built the same as us anyway. Lol, the weather has been bipolar overall. Yeah, yeah. I don't know why it's such a disaster, but what we do know is that it is a disaster, right? And so hopefully the care eventually comes, but right now it's not so forthcoming. Actually, in terms of government care, I feel like New York's been pretty good in terms of at least like COVID testing. I can't speak for like everything, but like whenever I've needed a test, I've been able to get it. Whereas when I was in Virginia over the winter, it was really hard to get a test. I had to go to like the CVS website and book it in advance, and a lot of those were booked up. And so in any case, a lot of these sort of government what to say, institutions, government sponsored care, a lot of it has been short and hard to find, right? Yeah, Ted Cruz ran away to Cancun. I saw that. There's a tweet about that. And some people were like, isn't that fake? And then other people were like, no, it's real. And I think it's been confirmed that it's real. But yeah, it's not a great sign of leadership when when your senator is running away from the frozen winter in Texas. Pipes, electricity, it's not built the same as ours. Yeah, yeah. And again, I'm not an engineer. I bet a lot of you guys are engineers and you know more about this sort of infrastructural stuff than I do. Just run away most of the time. Yeah. Yeah, those who have power, right? And the word power, you could interpret that a couple ways, right? We're talking about electricity power, but what you're talking about is political power too. Yeah, yeah. This is a problem, right? We need people in power to take care of us, and we're not really seeing it. And so, in an ideal caste system, the people who are in power take care of those who are not in power, right? So the Brahmins take care of the king, like we saw in that story, right? That's how it's supposed to be. And again, if you think about like as a family or something, like a father takes care of the family, a father takes care of the wife relies on the father, right? Those were the sort of traditional roles that we saw before. Again, it's not always that way. And in fact, often it is not that way, right? When the father has all the power, then he often exploits the wife or the family and traumatizes them and runs away to Cancun when it gets cold or some kind of crap like that. So we could imagine a caste system that is built on care, but very rarely do we actually see it, right? Most of the time, what we end up with is exploitation. And the reason I wanted to start with this is in the podcast, we heard some comments from Robert E. Lee, and I thought maybe he would be a good guy to start with. Have you guys heard of Robert E. Lee before? Here are his dates. He lived in the 19th century. He was a Confederate general. Yeah. So if you know any one person from the Confederacy, you probably know him, right? Or he's a good one to know. There are some other ones that are just as famous as him. Stonewall Jackson is another very famous one, right? But they were both famous generals in the Confederate Army. Robert E. Lee was the most famous and the highest up, right? He's the one who signed like the surrender papers at Appomattox and all that sort of stuff. Um, Kevin says New York has an obvious caste system. What? Tell us more. What is the obvious caste system? As you're typing, I'm going to keep going on Robert E. Lee, but I'm curious to hear what you have to say. So Robert E. Lee, what's his deal? He was very famous in Virginia. He grew up in Virginia. He had a house in Virginia. I also grew up in Virginia. I think maybe I told you that at the beginning of the semester. So there are a lot of roads named after him. There are a lot of schools named after him. There are colleges named after him. He was given like an honorary position at Washington and Lee University right after the war. I guess it would be the last 5 years of his life. People celebrated him. People still celebrate him. They see him as this sort of, gentleman who just got caught on the wrong side of the war, but he was a good soldier, and he was celebrated in terms of military victories and that sort of thing. He was kind of a brilliant general in a lot of ways. But I think what this podcast showed, and what I hope this class will show, he's also a symbol of white supremacy, right? He owned enslaved people, right? He promoted slavery. He was a slave master. He promoted white supremacy, and in fact, he said slavery and white supremacy were they're a part of his duty and the social duty of the American South, of America in general. He says it's a religious responsibility too. So I'll read you the quote. Based on wisdom and Christian principles, you do a gross wrong and injustice to the whole N-word race in setting them free. And it is only this consideration that has left the wisdom, intelligence, and Christianity of the South to support and defend the institution up to this time. So what is he saying? What is he saying with this quote? I'll let you read it again because his language is a little bit weird. But as you're looking at it again, I want you to put it in your own words, right? He's saying it's injustice to the whole Black race in setting them free. Why is he saying it's an injustice to the Black race to set them free?
I think in his mind, he thinks that Black people they are not able to take care of themselves. So they have to be slaves, so the master can take care of them.
Yes, exactly. And so as this quotation shows, it is totally clear. He is a white supremacist. He is a slave master. Maybe he even had good intentions, right? But it doesn't matter. He's still a white supremacist. He's still a slave master. So if we take a step back, we can try to imagine a compassionate and caring version of the caste system, just like Drisha was saying. He was trying to be a compassionate man. He wanted to take care of Black people because in his twisted mind, he's saying that they're incapable of taking care of themselves. So to have a statue of this man in the middle of Charlottesville, Virginia, and again, if it wasn't clear, that's what this is a statue of. Here he is riding his horse, looking very noble, standing up on top of the hill. It's still there. The statue is still there. It was made well after his death. So people were making it not in commemoration of the man himself, but of his legacy. And what is his legacy? Again, white supremacy and slavery. When we see this image, that is what we must think of, right? There is nothing else that this man represents other than white supremacy and slavery. And this statue is actually very famous because of what happened in Charlottesville in 2017. So maybe before we get into that, what happened in Charlottesville in 2017? Were you guys aware of the Unite the Right rally? Have you heard of this before? I'm kind of curious because I have this strong connection to Charlottesville. This was very much on my radar. Actually, I didn't live there at the time. I graduated from my PhD program in 2017, and I got a job somewhere else. So I had just left a few months before this happened. That is the one where the car ran into the group of people. Yeah, exactly. Other thoughts? Has anybody else heard of this? Unite the Right rally? it was definitely, you know, it was national news, international news, but it was a few years ago, so people tend to forget. All right, well, let me tell you, Jed. I'm glad you're curious. So uh, there was a call to take this statue down, right? The statue of Robert E. Lee that I was just telling you about. There was a call to take it down, and this made certain people who lived in and around Charlottesville angry, right? They said, no, we don't want the statue to go down. And the statue is still there, right? So these protests, they started over the statue. I have to be honest, many people walk past the statue and don't know its history. But if it was more known, then I believe people would be riots to take it down. Yeah, well, that's kind of what happened. Some people at least. So when people finally started to make this call to bring the statue down in 2016, 2017, actually, I was there earlier in the year in 2017, where a group of Klansmen, right, the KKK, I'm sure you've heard of the KKK, they came to Charlottesville earlier this year, the same year, 2017. I was still there at the time. I went to the event. I was, you know, part of the counter-protester group, yelling at the Klansmen, like, why are you here? Why are you coming to Charlottesville? They weren't even from Charlottesville, right? But again, they wanted, it was at this statue. They wanted to defend this statue and the other statues like this one. There are actually a few of them. It's all on the podcast. If this is interesting to you, you should listen to the podcast. They were defending these. The counter protests were saying we need to tear it down. Like Zamo is saying, people were getting really pissed off. Like I remember I was standing, there were a lot of police. There was like a line of police separating us from the KKK members. There's a guy next to me who's like, said, yeah, I'm gonna fight you. Come on, yeah, talking to you, right? He was like very clear that he just wanted to punch a Klans member, right? So it was a very kind of tense moment. The police escorted the KKK out of town to prevent people from destroying their cars and stuff. It was a bizarre time. The whole thing was totally bizarre, and people were really pissed off, right? So then the cops came out. There was tear gas, and I was like, all right, at that point, it's time to get out of there. So this was before the Unite the Right rally, right? So if the Unite the Right rally was at the end of the summer in August, the thing I'm talking about was the beginning of summer, and by the end of the summer, I was gone because I had graduated. I got a new job. And so, anyways, but fast forward a couple months. The Nazis come back, the Confederate battle flags. I'm sure you've seen these Confederate flags before. So these come out, a Nazi flag comes out, and also the Gadsden flag, which I don't know as much about, but that's the Don't Tread on Me. Have you seen this before? Don't Tread on Me. It's based on a cartoon that I think Benjamin Franklin created, I want to say. I don't actually know the history of the Gadsden flag very well, but as you can see, all three of these symbols are connected together. Don't the Nazis host parade through there and they got jumped or something like that? Yeah, so as you can see, there is a parade happening here. It happened over 2 days, as I wrote above. It was the 11th and the 12th. So this is during the day on the 12th. On the night of the 11th, there was this crowd of mostly white men. I don't know if that's a young boy or a woman with short hair. I can't really tell, but let's say mostly white people carrying tiki torches that were lit up, coming through the University of Virginia. This was my school, right? It's unimaginable. Again, I wasn't there for it. It's amazing to me that like the police or the fire department didn't come out and say this is, you know, a fire hazard at the University of Virginia, but of course that did not happen. And so they were able to walk through the University of Virginia, take these very angry looking pictures, and they were chanting, "You will not replace us." This is on tape, right? Like this is like recorded. And then at some point, somebody felt very clever and they replaced the word "you" with "Jews." They started saying, "Jews will not replace us." And so it goes to show this white supremacy movement is not limited to being anti-Black, right? It's also anti-Jew, it's anti-Semitic. And so even this group that, at least in some circles, is considered to be white is also being denigrated, obviously and vocally, by this crowd. And in fact, when I went to that anti-KKK rally, I was surprised by how many anti-Semitic signs that they had as they were walking through Charlottesville. I didn't realize that was a major priority for the KKK, but apparently it was. So maybe this is a question worth asking. Why do these mass count, they reserve a parade? peaceful protests, if they're using hate speech. Yeah, this is an important question, right? It's like, is there room for the freedom of speech for hate speech? The answer to that has to be no, right? If hate speech promotes violence, like we saw with our president or our ex-president on January 6th, right? If it's speech that promotes violence, then it has to be censored, right? It has to be stopped because there is no room for speech that promotes violence. To me, that's not an unreasonable stance. But yeah, this all is sort of flirting with pretty major questions for the First Amendment. But more specifically, why do these white supremacists feel like they're being replaced, right? If we can kind of step into the mind of the white supremacist and try to understand what their problem is, I think actually the system of caste can help us sort of figure it out. Why do they feel like they're being replaced? Yeah. And Suzanne was comparing it to Nazi Germany, and that's the move that Wilkerson made too, right? And I think that is a fair and appropriate comparison. Again, you know, as this whoever this guy is, as this guy shows, right? The Nazis are certainly part of the conversation. So what do you guys think? Why do these angry white men feel like they're being replaced?
I think it is mostly the uneducated white people who can get a better job. They think they're being replaced. But those who are really educated, they don't feel the same way.
Okay, good. Jobs, education, that's definitely part of it. I feel like they feel like they're better than most people. They believe they're being replaced because they believe country is becoming more country of color. Yeah, exactly. And so what it kind of brings up is something we talked about last time, is this idea of class versus caste, right? So I think the best part of America, if we do have a hierarchy, it's based on your abilities, right? Your job, your education, it comes from how hard you're willing to work, right? This is something we talked about in my group last time when we were in class together, is if you work hard, you put in the time, you put in the hours, you'll be rewarded, right? And so just like Drissa was saying, there's a sense that in America now, if you work hard, you will get the education you deserve, you'll get the job you deserve, you'll get the things that you work for. Now, in a caste system, is that the case? How does the caste system work? They believe they should have the power. Yeah. So if we think about in a caste system, it's not necessarily based on ability, right? If I'm born into a Brahmin caste, I deserve to be a Brahmin. It doesn't matter how good I am, how smart I am, how hard I work. None of that matters. I'm a Brahmin. I get to be a Brahmin. End of conversation, right? And so if we go back to this kind of white supremacy caste system, these guys are thinking, I'm a white man. I deserve to have a job. End of conversation, right? It doesn't matter how good I am, how smart I am, how capable I am. I deserve a job, right? And, you know, a part of me, my heart kind of goes out to him, right? Because I'm a white man and I'm looking for jobs, right? I want a better job. I want more opportunities. And even if I have a good job, I'm constantly applying for grants and conferences and awards and all that sort of stuff. And so I feel like I need more opportunities. I want more, right? And it's very easy to look around and think, you know who's taking it away from me? It's all the other people who aren't white men, right? It's because of affirmative action. That's why I'm not getting the things that I deserve. Technically on your luck of who you're born under. Yeah, basically. Yeah, exactly. And in fact, I've read statistics, even though I'm sure these men are, as you can tell, they're blaming Jews for some reason, which is very confusing to me still. Actually, the real reason that there's increased competition in terms of jobs is it because more women are working, right? Not to say that that's a bad thing. I think that can be a very good thing in many cases. But you know, if you think about it, there are more women in America than there are people of color, right? Half the population is women. And so it's really the increased presence of women in the workplace that are making more competition among really everybody, right? And so again, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. In terms of space, there's so much space in America in terms of possibilities, right? I think these are people, as we've said before, who are not necessarily using their imagination or their opportunities to the best of their ability, and they are kind of falling short and blaming who they kind of almost like ghosts, right? Who they think are taking things away from them. So in any case, I thought this was a very interesting chat to sort of focus on, right? It really does come back to this sense of, I am born into this caste and I deserve all the things that come along with this caste. How dare society not give them to me? I'm going to go yell in Charlottesville and light some things on fire as I'm going there. As you can see, the next day, fights, right? We've got pepper spray. We've got people hitting each other with these sticks, flags. There are worse photos than this. I just wanted to show the chaos. But if you're looking for violence and pain, you can find that too. So I don't want to horrify you guys, but it was a bad day, right? A lot of bad things happened. I forget who it was. Somebody said somebody got hit by a car. I forget. There's so many comments. Was it Caitlin maybe said it? Anyways, but yes, somebody said that this happened, right? So this image won a Pulitzer Prize. So as you can see, there's a lot going on here. These folks in the background, you can see FUK. I wonder where that word is. But so they are counter protesters, right? And so the white supremacists had their protest, and then the anti-racist group had their counter protest. And then a white supremacist got in his car and he drove his car into the crowd of counter protesters. And as you can see, like, this dude is flipping over, this dude is sideways, these people are flipping over, right? I think I was looking at this earlier. I think these shoes belong to this person. I'm not totally sure where those shoes came from, but somebody lost their shoes. And yes, one person died. So the person who drove this car, see if I can get the size, is James Alex Fields Jr., and he was put in prison for life. He killed one person with his car, he injured 19 others. Beyond just this incident with the car, many other people were injured too in fights like this one. So it was a violent day, right? And again, this is why it made national news, is because somebody died. So really horrendous, right? And if you think about it, all of it comes back to these stupid statues, right? Like, is it really worth murdering somebody over a goddamn hunk of metal? And so really what this podcast was about, and what I'm asking you to do, is to think about, what do they mean, right? What are these symbols of? And so again, the Unite the Right rally, what was it? It was an attempt to unify American white nationalist movement in order to oppose the removal of Robert E. Lee's statue, right? So it really does come back to these statues and what they symbolize. The podcast is called American Idols. And so American Idol, of course, was a TV show. I don't know if you guys were aware of that, but this is sort of a play on that word, right? So what is an idol? What is an idol?
Idol are usually statues that people consider to be divine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it could be a person. Kristen's giving a very common definition is someone you look up to, someone you look up to. Yeah, so everybody's saying someone you look up to. That's one definition, and maybe you're aware of this, but when you look things up in the dictionary, there are often multiple definitions. And so another word we can think about is idolatry. Have you heard of idolatry before? So idolatry is usually not talking about a person, but it's talking about an image, a statue, a painting, a representation, usually of a god that people then worship. Have you heard of this before? So what would it mean to say that these are idols of white supremacy? Then this is saying these are representations of white supremacy that people are then worshiping, right? And so if you zoom in, again, if you listen to the podcast, you'll hear these religious connotations to these images. This is, probably can't see it very well, it's a little blurry, but this is a Confederate flag, but it's representing a cross as well. You can see the cross there. And that is no coincidence, right? This is a religious image that is also an image of a Confederate soldier. They call him Johnny Reb. This is one they talk about in the podcast as well. It was established 1909, so before the Robert E. Lee statue by 15 years. And so when we think about what is this image, what is this doing, how is this installed, what does it mean to people, there really is no explanation other than it is an idol of white supremacy, right? Fortunately, this one was taken down. So pretty recently, within the last year, this was taken down. Like I said, this one still stands today. There's a court injunction to prevent its removal, and so there's like a tarp over it. People have like tried to destroy it and do all sorts of bad stuff. Yeah, what did they do with the statue? Actually, that's a great question. I have no idea. I haven't been back here since they took it down. So is this still there, or did they take this down too? I really don't know the answer, but I looked this up and found this image. I thought it was very compelling, right? So they're taking this one down. There's actually a whole bunch of Confederate statues coming down in Virginia and across the country. In Richmond, which was the capital of the Confederacy, Robert E. Lee statues are being taken down. So there's probably like a graveyard of Confederate statues out there somewhere, and I don't know where it is. Maybe they melt them down and do something with the bronze. It's a great question. I'm not sure what happens to these statues when they're taken down. So maybe just to sort of cap this thought off, really what you hear in that podcast is a way to use religion not to create a caste system, but to deconstruct it, right? So how can we use religion to dismantle white supremacy? And so this language of idolatry kind of gives us a tip about how we might be able to do that. Are you aware of how Christians, and not just Christians, but Muslims and Jews and Christians all together, are you aware of how they feel about idolatry? Are they thumbs up idolatry, or are they thumbs down for idolatry? You guys know your 10 commandments? Why is the second commandment that thou shalt have no gods before me? What is this reference to? What does this have to do with idolatry? Can we put this together? What does this second commandment have to do with idolatry? Well, idolizing God, no other figures. Yeah, exactly. If there's one true God, right, which is basically the first commandment, that there is one true God. If there's one true God, you can't idolize some other God, right? Now it gets confusing because you've got the whole Jesus is God thing, but that's not Jesus, right? And that's not Jesus. So we should not be worshiping these damn statues. And we can use these Christian principles, these, and again, not just Christian, this is Old Testament stuff, these biblical principles to combat white supremacy, right? If this is a monument, a religious monument to white supremacy to remind people of the white supremacist past, then, you know, according to the second commandment, to worship an idol of white supremacy would be idolatry, right? It would be against the values of Christianity. And so, again, listen to the podcast, and they make a pretty compelling argument for this. If this is an idol of white supremacy, which I would argue it is, and I hope you guys can see how it is, then we can use the second amendment, this concept of anti-idolatry, to take them down, right? To show how these are contrary to the principles of really the entire biblical system, the people of the book. Can you guys see that? Questions about religion and these idols? So this is something you could write about. You don't have to write about this, but this is something you could write about, is these statues are idols of white supremacy. And by dismantling them and dismantling the systems that they represent, which again, the podcast points out, you know, our country might finally be able to move forward. Okay, we've got, how much time? 25, 35, 40, no, 35 minutes. So we actually have a lot of minutes. So here is a pretty similar list. I squished two slides together, but it's still basically the same ideas that we were discussing last time. I think rather than put you in breakout rooms, because one thing I've discovered is that breakout rooms tend to be very quiet, and especially on materials you've already discussed, there's probably not a lot of new things you want to say. But I think if we discuss these as a group, we might be able to come up with some good stuff, right? Kevin's lolling. Maybe I missed the joke, but yeah. So no, are you lolling at the quietness of the breakout room? Is that what you're lolling about? And so maybe we can talk about this together, because we kind of ran out of time last time, if I recall, right? We had maybe 5 minutes to discuss. So why don't we go through it together? But I'm going to need you guys to talk more. You guys ready to talk? I'm tired of talking. I've been talking all day. So now I want to take a break. You guys gotta give me a break now, right? So we talked a bit about caste versus class just a moment ago, so that should be pretty clear. What about caste versus race? Why? I don't know. I don't think we quite finished this conversation. We talked about it in my subgroup, but we didn't talk about it in the big group. So why does Wilkerson use this language of caste instead of race? And again, as you think about this, I just want to remind you, I would love to talk to you, Professor. It's always fun. Yeah, okay, here we go. So now it's you guys time to talk. So one thing that maybe is not obvious is that this word caste is a little bit weird, right? And so in ancient India, people talk about caste all the time. You got your Brahmins, you got your warriors, blah, blah, blah. Using caste in America is a very weird thing to do, right? And so it's unique to Wilkerson's book. It's kind of the argument of her book. I know it's a little bit in the background, but that's what she's trying to do, right? Is to ask us to think about America in this new way. And so why is she doing that, right? What does caste do that race does not do? Or what does race do that caste does not do? What's the difference between these two terms? Obviously they're related, but what is their relationship? How are they the same? How are they different? It's a hard question, but let's think about it together.
I feel like one thing in common is that they separate people. That's one quite obvious speculation.
That's great. Yeah, so they function in society in a very similar way. They separate people. And maybe to build off of Kevin's comment, we can think, how do they do that, right? Do they separate people in the same way, or do they do it in a different way?
I think both, personally.
How are they the same? How are they different? Let's focus on the difference. How are they different? How are they different in the way that they separate people?
They're different in the way they separate people because something like race be expressed as a race, or ethnicity, but the caste isn't based on power.
I think I got that, Leo. It was a little quiet. I don't know if there's a way for you to speak closer in the mic, but tell me if I miss anything. So what I think you were saying is caste is mostly based on power, whereas race is based on ethnicity, and maybe we can add to that like appearance, right? The way that people look. Would you agree with me on that, Leo? Yeah, okay, very good. And we got stuff in the chat. Eric says maybe because caste does not allow mobility, so the word has a stricter tone. Race might seem more offensive, but also it has a mixture of similarities and differences. Race and caste you're born under, which is something you can't control. All right, so we're getting all sorts of good stuff now. So another way that they're similar, maybe I'll help write some of this down too. So similar is you're born into it and cannot act your way out, right? You can't make money and all of a sudden join a new caste. You can't make money and all of a sudden join a new race, right? Unless you're Michael Jackson. No, that's a bad joke. I shouldn't make that joke, but it was low-hanging fruit. So if you can act your way out, then it is class, not caste. Remember, we talked about that last time. So that should be pretty clear. And in fact, what we're talking about here is heritability, right? Heritability. You inherit your caste, and then there's nothing you can do to change it. Is that pretty clear? The second the second pillar here. So that's one way that they're similar. Let me look back again. Race might seem more offensive. Yeah, this is an interesting one. How is race offensive? This is something we also talked about in my group last time. Calling somebody racist, saying racism, saying that's racist, you're racist. This is something that people do now, but it's almost like too extreme, right? For somebody to be racist, you know, obviously, where are they? These guys are racist, right? Like this guy in particular. I don't know what he's doing in his khakis and his Nazi flag, but he's most definitely racist. There's no question about it, right? This guy's racist. But I think most people in our society, in our classroom, in our school, the people we interact with, most people we could probably safely say are not racist, right? I like to think that I'm not racist. I'm not walking around with a goddamn Nazi flag, right? What a ridiculous clown this guy is. And so it's almost too extreme to talk about somebody being racist. Would you say that you are part of a caste system, though, the way that Wilkerson describes it? Does the caste system affect you and your life? Some people would say yes. I like the way you worded that, Kevin. It's very safe. It's like, yes, some people might say that. I'm not gonna say who. It might be me, it might not be me. No, I think, and maybe I'm trying to lead you too much with this question, but that's sort of my point. Yeah, exactly. Is Wilkerson is saying this isn't evil, right? I mean, it sort of is evil, but it's not some one person is evil. It's not like Bill is evil and racist the same way that like Hitler was evil and racist, or that you are all evil and racist, right? That's not what I'm trying to say. That's not what she's trying to say. She's saying we're all part of this larger system, and it's not our fault. It's not our individual responsibility for making it. We're just all part of it, right? Society has made it. Our ancestors made it, and their ancestors before them, and we perpetuate it. We participate in it. It's not because we're evil. It's not because we're bad. It's not because we're mean. It's just something that happens, right? And so even though we are all partially responsible for the system that we're a part of, it also kind of washes our hands a little bit in terms of guilt, right? Rather than saying you're racist, no, you're racist, no, you're racist, which is often the conversation you see on Twitter or something. The reality is we are all racist, right? And we are all part of the system. We are all part of this caste system. Even people of color are racist, right? They have these systems of caste that they cannot be pulled out of. It is what we are born in. It is what America was founded on. And so this is something that we have to see, right? Rather than saying you're either racist or you're not, there's something kind of in the middle where we can say, yes, we are all part of this thing. It doesn't mean we're evil, and it doesn't mean that we're totally guilt-free. We're something in the middle, right? Where we have to deal with this, and yet, you know, at the same time, see that we are all a part of this rather than just certain individuals. Okay, good. Other thoughts on caste versus race? I thought Leo brought up some good stuff about power, how caste is built on the system of power, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with the way you look, whereas race is sort of like your ethnicity. Race looks like it's biology, right? This is a very tricky thing to think about. Looks like biology, right? You might think we have different genes, but in fact, and please, you know, any biology majors in the crowd, please support me on this. There's only one race in terms of DNA. Yeah, caste equals power. I like that. In terms of DNA, there is only one race. So you guys aware of this? The human race. Exactly. So this sense that because people look a little bit different, we might think, oh, there's some sort of biological, natural difference between people. But again, if you engage at the level of DNA, we are 99.9 the same, right? Very minor things about our skin and hair and eyes and whatever, but our guts, our immune systems, everything that makes our body function, that makes us humans, that makes us the way they are All of that is the same. We are all humans. Biologically speaking, we are all the same. And so when we start thinking about race in terms of biology, there's actually a word for that. It's called eugenics. Have you guys heard of eugenics before? So the section on pure blood, purity and pollution, it really was reflecting on this idea of eugenics. So here's an image from a book. Maybe I'll show you the image first and we can just think about what it is doing. All right, so can you all see this? It says pigmentation of hair and eyes. And in the light dotted space, it says light and mixed predominant. So that means, you know, light hair, light eyes, or, you know, blue eyes with brown hair, or blonde hair with dark eyes, you know, some blue eye, blonde combination. So light hair and mixed eyes predominant in the dotted place. The sort of light gray is light hair and eyes, and mixed is more than dark. That's a greater than sign. The middle gray color is even. The darker gray color is darker hair and eyes, more than light and mixed. And then the darkest gray is dark predominant. So, okay, so first of all, what is this a map of? Can you recognize where this is in the world?
Europe, Italy,
Europe, exactly. Yeah, so this is the Mediterranean Sea, right? Here's Italy, you got the boot. Here's Greece. Here's Northern Africa. Here's what we might call West Eurasia, right? Or Eastern Europe, or getting into the Middle East, right? A lot of different names for this area. So, okay, a lot of the time you look at this map, and these days we would call these white people, right? And yet, from when this book came out, there's all these different grades of white people based on what part of Europe they come from. So where are the whitest of the white people? Where are the lighter hair and eye pigmented people? What area of Europe is this? Can you guys recognize this?
Russia, Sweden,
Sweden? Yeah.
Russia.
So Sweden, Norway, this is Denmark, right? The Netherlands. I'm not. Or sorry, no. The Netherlands. Where are the Netherlands? Are they here? Anyways, I'm not the. No, the Netherlands would be up here. I'm not the strongest geographer of Europe, but we could call this Scandinavia. Maybe you're familiar with Scandinavia. The Caucasus Mountains. Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Where are the Caucasus? They're actually all the way over here, which is, it's a very arbitrary term. You've heard the word Caucasian before. It just means white people, right? But there is no like biological basis to say that white people come from the Caucasus. It's just made up eugenics, basically. These things still exist in our society now, to try to hide the fact that these are social constructs, but they very much are, right? So let's see where this book comes from. So this book is from Carlton Coon's The Races of Europe, the White Race, and the New World, 1939. So what was happening in the world in 1939? Does that year ring a bell for anyone?
World War II.
World War II, yes. It was just the beginning, right? United States didn't get involved yet at this point. By the way, the Caucasian area you said is Hungary, I believe. Yeah, maybe are the Caucasus on this side or on this side? We can look it up. Why don't we look it up? I don't want to give you guys misinformation. But yeah, so World War II, the Americans get involved after Pearl Harbor, which was what, December 7th, 1941? Is that a date you guys have memorized? That's a good date to memorize. So right before that, the Nazis are kind of running things. They're at the height of their power. And this guy, Carlton Coon, he's an American, right? So to see this map that we were just looking at, it goes to show that these ideas were not just like made up by Hitler or something, right? This is what people were thinking all over the world, or at least particularly in Europe and the Americas, specifically in America. There were supporters of the Nazis giving talks in Madison Square Garden, right? All right, so let's see, the Caucasus Mountains, Georgia, yeah, the east side of the Black Sea. So what did I identify? So the west side of the Caspian Sea, the east side of the Black Sea. Let's see, was I right? Yeah, exactly, right here. So the east of the Black Sea, west side of the Caspian Sea. So this area right here, the Caucasus. So really the story of this idea of a Caucasian is these anthropologists. I don't mean to blame all the anthropologists of the world, but this is basically what their job was, right? This guy, Carlton Kuhn, he was an anthropologist. They went around the world and they just measured people's skulls and measured their noses and looked at their skin and their eyes, and they made weird maps like this where they're saying, oh, this is where the whitest white people are from. And they found some nice looking skulls in the Caucasus, and they're like, yeah, that's us, white people. We're from the Caucasus. We're Caucasian. And the other categories that they came up with were Negroid and Mongoloid, right? Which are terms that they still use now in biological anthropology. My sister is a biological anthropologist. She can verify these things. So these ideas, they feel very outdated. Again, they frankly feel very racist. And yet people still use them now, right? They're still part of the biological terminology that was established 100 years ago. So anyways, it just goes to show this idea of a white race versus a black race, this idea of white supremacy that is being promoted by these idols, it's made up, right? It's not biology. It's not somehow naturally true. It's not somehow biologically determined. In fact, there are many white people who try to pretend like they're black people, right? There was an academic woman who pretended like she was a person of color. She even wrote books about how she grew up in the hood, or I forget exactly what terminology she was using, but then she was exposed as a fraud, and it turned out she like grew up in Kansas or something like that. There was another white woman named, I think, Rachel Dumazile or something like that. You guys know what I'm talking about? So there are people who kind of sit on these borders of what we might call races, right? Where maybe they look a little more Asian than white. Maybe they look a little more black than white, and yet they are considered white in some circles and considered black in other circles, right? I used a kind of a distasteful joke about Michael Jackson earlier, right? He later in his life, he very consciously tried to sit on that border and perhaps cross between it as much as he could. It goes to show these categories of race are very carefully determined and very carefully maintained. And so that might lead us to this next one, endogamy. What is that talking about? Didn't we talk about monogamy in class before? What is that suffix gamey talking about? What if I told you endo means in? Endogamy, something with marriage. I think, yes, it is something with marriage. So if endo means in, yeah, it's marrying within your group, right? Marrying within your caste. So how does endogamy, and this is really important, cannot marry another race. Yeah, so how does endogamy promote the caste system? What does endogamy do for the caste system? Maybe I'll phrase this another way. Without endogamy, can there be a caste system? And I would argue no, but why not, right? Why is endogamy so important? Yeah, Drissa, how does endogamy preserve a caste system?
Well, if there is no endogamy, that means people, will get married to other people, and that will definitely end the caste system, because it is supposed to be like something, I don't know how to say that, but something that shouldn't be like mixed with other people.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
in order to the caste to be maintained, people shouldn't be married to the outsider.
Mhm. Yeah, perfect. And so that's exactly what this figure, Ambedkar, was saying as well. So he is a famous leader of the Dalit rights movement. You guys remember what Dalits are? What is a Dalit? That's a word that shows up in the Wilkerson reading pretty often. So it's a good one to know. You guys know this word? Yes, the lowest caste. It's the outcasts, right? They're the ones who are not even in the system. They're the four Brahmin. Then you've got the warriors and kings, the Kshatriya. Then you've got the merchants and the regular farmers and that sort of thing, the Vaishya. And then you've got the servants who are the Shudra. This one is not even on the list, right? They're the outcasts. They're the lowest of the entire system, if they're even in the system. And so Ambedkar, he was born into this Dalit caste. As you can see, he's a very well-educated, well-dressed man, and he railed against it, right? He pushed against the caste system and called for a Dalit rights movement. And so this is how he put it. He said, caste is an artificial chopping off of the population into fixed and definite units, each one prevented from fusing into another through the custom of endogamy, right? So endogamy keeps these groups separate. And by not allowing people to marry across these groups, it allows the groups to persist. Once people start marrying each other, then all of a sudden, there is no difference, right? There is no difference between the groups culturally speaking, because through marriage, you are sharing cultures, and racially speaking, right? Biologically speaking, however you want to put it. Obviously, you know, the way that people appear in terms of appearance, they will start to look the same, right? And so this is something we will see in American society, right? These Dalit rights movements were happening in the mid 20th century. These civil rights movements in America were happening only in the middle of the 20th century, right? 1960s, it's kind of a very active time for civil rights in America. And so it's only been a few generations, right? My parents were kids when my parents were born, right? There was still segregation on the books. Brown versus the Board of Education was like almost the exact same year that my parents were born. I want to say 56 was Brown versus Board of Education. It's the same time basically. So, you know, they're still alive. They've seen all of these changes in their lifetime. There hasn't been enough time to push against these practices of endogamy, which were really the law, right? When they were born. There are laws against miscegenation. Have you heard this term before? It's basically the opposite of endogamy. And the only reason I bring it up is it's often used in terms of these laws. They're called miscegenation laws, which basically say it is against the law for different races to marry each other. But then you have to define what are different races, right? 100 years ago, miscegenation would mean somebody from Scandinavia marrying somebody from Italy. You know, now there's a sense that, yeah, they're all European white people, right? It's all the same thing. And so it just goes to show these are very fluid categories that are constantly changing across time and across generations. In Wilkerson, they spent a lot of time talking about one drop of blood, right? Our grand Anglo-Saxon character must be preserved, and the pure unmixed blood flowing down from our Aryan, right? We talked about Aryans before. Progenitors must not be mixed with the Iberic race. Who is the Iberic race? Where is Iberia? Have you guys heard of Iberia before? Where's Iberia? I'll give you a hint. It's on this map. Spain, exactly. It's this. It's the Iberian Peninsula. Iberian Peninsula. Did I spell that right? No, I put too many N's. Peninsula, yes. This is the Iberian Peninsula. So it's Spain and it's Portugal. And so as you can see, you're right, exactly. As you can see from this map, they have dark hair and dark eyes, right? We don't want to mix races with them, some Anglo-Saxon minister says. I think this was an American person speaking. But it goes to show, right? The caste system used to keep out many Italians, many Spanish, many Portuguese, many Greeks, right? Now, all these people would be considered white without even thinking about it, right? So the ways in which the caste system are enforced tend to change over time, over generations. Okay, we've got less than 10 minutes. How did that happen? Why don't we go back to this? Are there any things we still haven't gone over yet? Purity, pollution, we pretty much have actually covered this stuff. Just so we're totally clear, what about this first one? What did we say for this first pillar of caste? What's that referring to? Divine will. What are some examples of divine will supporting the caste system? What's that talking about? This is a review from last time.
I think you mean that God has decided that some people have to be superior to others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So how did people support that using scripture, for example? We talked about two different scriptures. Remember, we had the Rig Veda, the Hymn of Man, otherwise known as Purusha. Remember that? And then we also had the Bible. We had Noah and his son Ham, and then the descendants of Ham. So how are these stories used to demonstrate a divine will, some sort of scriptural support of the caste system? I guess Drissa basically already answered the question. Maybe that's why you guys are quiet. They have their own rules and beliefs. Yeah, and just like Drissa was saying, in the case of the Bible, for example, Noah curses Ham. He says all of your descendants are going to be slaves, and so later, when there are slaves in America, people can use this scripture to say, "Look, it's in the Bible. It has to be this way. It's not. I didn't make the rules. I'm just living by it, right? Don't hate the player, hate the game, right? I didn't make these rules. Look at the Bible." And so we can think about scripture as a human activity again, right? We can look to these stories as a way of justifying what people want to do in their own society, right? If I want to be a white man on the top and keep my job and keep my possessions and keep my place in life, I can say, look, God wants it to be this way. And so that is what I will push, right? And that is what people did in the past. We talked about this last time a little bit, I think. There's Jim Crow laws. I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. Yeah, here's another one. This Georgia judge saying degradation resulting from the taint of blood adheres to the descendants of Ham in this country, like the poisoned tunic of Nessus, right? He's bringing up two different references here. You guys probably haven't heard of this. The poisoned tunic of Nessus. That's Greek mythology. Nessus was he was a centaur. Do you guys know what a centaur is? What's a centaur? That one you probably do know. Come on. Centaur is half something. Half man, half amazing, half horse. Yes, exactly. Half man, half horse. Oh, I just got rid of the chat. What did I do? Go back to me. Okay, we're back. Yeah, half man, half amazing, half man, half horse. Exactly. So Nessus was a centaur, and Hercules killed him. And then he used a poison arrow to kill him. And so the tunic that Nessus was wearing was poisoned. And then eventually he like tricked Hercules' lover to bring it back to him. But anyways, the upshot is whenever you wear this tunic, it will kill you, right? And it killed Hercules. That's how Hercules died, actually. So what are they saying here? The taint of the blood in the descendants of Ham adheres to them like the poisoned tunic of Nessus. Ooh, right? He's saying that there's some original poison, this original sin from the sins of Ham, this curse that was laid upon him by his father that still follows these people down to the present. Now, again, biologically speaking, that is false, right? Even theologically speaking, that is false. And yet people still made this kind of crap up and made these laws, because this guy was a judge, right? Made these laws that forced people to stay away from each other. So when you're thinking about why separate people like this, what they would say is, you know, things like sin, things like pollution, right? But what we can say as outsiders, it is social exploitation and ways to keep one group in power. I think Leo used the word power earlier, which is a good and important one here, right? I think a lot of this does come down to power. So, okay, maybe that's enough of this. One big takeaway I want you to have is that caste is a social construction, right? And I think that's something we can take away from Wilkerson's work, is she wants to remind us, this is something that people do. People did in history and people are still doing now, right? And so by paying attention to that history, we can think about what are the mechanisms by which caste is perpetuated, and then at the same time, what are the mechanisms by which caste can be destructed, right? One way is we can take down these symbols. That's a good start, but you can't stop there, right? A statue is just a statue. And so this is something they got at in the podcast as well, is how can we not only dismantle these statues, how can we also dismantle the systems that they represent? So this is one last slide that I just made of my own thoughts. You might be wondering, like, where do we go from here, right? Up until now, you know, up until really very recent conversations, I think many Americans felt like they had a choice. It's basically, you know, be racist, be this evil racist person, or be good, right? And those were the two choices, and everybody chose, let's be good. Being racist is bad. What I think Wilkerson is reminding us is that there's something in between. We don't have to just pretend like racism isn't real, right? We don't have to pretend like, you know, those are the two choices. You're evil, you're either evil or you're good. You can still be good and still be affected by this caste system, because this is the system that America is built on, right? Thomas Jefferson, slave owner, right? He had children with his slave, Sally Hemings, who happened to be the slave who was a half sister of his wife who had passed away. Look it up, horrible story. He owned his children, right? He owned his goddamn children. And so when we think about moving forward, should we burn it all down? Should we burn the $2 bill because it has Thomas Jefferson's face on it? He was a slave owner. You could, you know, I don't think that's the most productive thing to do, right? I don't think forgetting the past and pretending like it never happened is the way to go. I don't think that's the way to go. I don't think we should put it up on a statue either, but I don't think this is the way to go. So what do? We need to, first of all, recognize these pillars, right? These things that we've been talking about, the mechanisms by which caste is created and promoted. First, just we got to understand it, right? Step number one, understand where it comes from. Two, address problems on an individual level. Be nice to each other. And in fact, a lot of you are very nice to each other. So I don't have to go into too much detail on that. That is a big part of it. But step number three, and this is important, look at the systems in which the caste system is being promoted, right? Or is at least persisting. Health systems, occupation systems, systems of entitlement, systems of punishments, right? This is one that's gotten a lot of attention recently, is who gets punished and how severely. And this is where the real work needs to happen, right? And these are the most slippery places where you can just say, I didn't make the rules, I'm just playing by them, right? I'm a white man, I didn't make the rules, I'm just playing by it. But again, we, at least in some very distant sense of the word, are all a part of the system, right? So this is something we have to figure out together. It's not your individual responsibility, it's all of our responsibility. And I have Jesus here washing the feet of his disciples, a very obviously not white Jesus. And you know, this is the way we do it, right? Is we put ourselves in low positions. We have to give things up. We have to look for opportunities to move forward. And this is something we'll come back to again, but I didn't want to leave you all hanging with a bunch of complaints with no advice for moving forward. So, all right, so we're out of time. Let's see, Zama wrote something. What do you write? There were probably like 40 billion $2 bills, so you aren't making a difference. Right, exactly, right? We got to think, you know, on the individual level, what can we do? On the systemic level, what can we do? And again, we gotta treat this as a group, right? It's not going to be any one individual effort. All right. Any last thoughts for the day? How we all doing? I know these are big ideas. Do you feel like you're ready to write this paper for tonight, or the forum post? You guys feel good about that? Thumbs up, forum post. All right. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a good day. It looks like it's not snowing anymore. So if you want to go for a walk, now is not a bad time to do it. Of course, wear some boots and bundle up.